holiday. So I did write some short little bit of text notes. Where did I put them? Let me go over here. Yeah, they actually work. Okay, so we'll get to that later. Weak evidence, contradiction, evidence mining. These are all concepts I've been arguing for 7 years at least. And Holiday has been belligerently unwilling to concede the points. Just, yeah. Rationally make the concession. He just keeps defending the status quo and saying somehow anybody who's making an argument against them has some monstrously higher standard that they're supposed to meet. They don't have to just make a good argument. They have to make a spectacularly, phantasmagorically much more superior argument somehow. And that's the way it should be. And this is the same idiot who's, filing lawsuits against City Hall and thinks he's going to win. I mean, it's just too stupid. The last thing, all I've been doing lately, these videos, right? I've been pointing out where somebody else is saying something stupid, and then I point out the right answer, and I go into some explanation, and so we get to this whole spinning wheel thing, and I sort of explain how it's the bearings, and the actual thing is just absorbing the force in the opposite direction, and these are really functional, decent explanations, just opposed to their silly explanation that somebody's providing, conventional physics usually. And, perfectly satisfying my obligations. My last 20 videos have been rock solid. And this asshole is, again, just complaining, bitching, moaning. I know how to do it better. And he's just been nothing but an obstacle for 7 years. And he's telling me I should pay attention. So he's so pompous, like somehow he knows what the right way, how to communicate with people and be persuasive. When, I can't even know, how many views do you think your videos would get without me still listening to you, shithead? I mean, you're obviously not a successful communicator. So why are you giving communication advice? Argument advice. You obviously aren't very good at it. I mean, amazing bullshit. I mean, the last thing I'm interested in, I just have no fucking interest in this bullshit. Arguing how to argue? Fuck you! Why don't you just make the arguments? I mean, this is just a Piro video. He's making a Piro video. So right after he points out how Piro's an asshole, he sits there and makes a video that is zero content and just more Piroisms.
To DraftScience and a reminder to others about the status of quantum mechanics, and most particularly what they think about light and the wave nature. Whenever they're talking about the wave nature...
Yeah, sorry about the, it didn't sound too good. If I increase the volume, I guess the speaker's fucked or something. Something's not quite right. Shouldn't be making that echoey sound, but I'm not redoing this. Alright, so he just assumes to know what, here, I'll tell you what quantum mechanics is. So I've actually played the, what's his name? The guy who's doing the podcast now, Sean Carroll. And he did a 60 symbols video like 4 or 5 years ago where he pointed out how physics is pretty embarrassing because, if you poll the physicist, 1/3 of them believe in many worlds interpretation, 1/3 believe in the Copenhagen, and 1/3 believe in the, random is a fundamental function of the universe. Bullshit. And, but Holiday pompously says, no, I know better. I know what the real argument is. Fuck.
Nature of light.
I mean, I play the videos as they show up. Obviously support. The Royal Institute just posted the 20-year-old video. Okay, the Christmas lectures. You think they posted them because they don't think the guy is talking the shit they believe in? They think it's nonsense? And they posted it anyway? Without any kind of warning? Oh, this is just nonsense. We real physicists don't believe in this anymore. I mean, this is so fucking stupid.
and Maxwell's equations most prominently, they're actually talking classically, not quantum mechanically.
There's no talking about Maxwell's equations. They're just formalizations that give you the right answer. So there's no disputing them in that sense. They generally are correct. So they have enough of the right relationships in them to get the right answer. And they're not all that fucking complicated, to tell you the truth. I mean, there's not all that. It's distances and time. You know, there's nothing magical in there. Intensity, distance, time. I mean, the vectors. I mean, it isn't. So that's not the subject. Maxwell's equations is not the fucking subject. What's the force made out of? That's the fucking subject. And they say it's made out of something. Let's say 104 interconnected fields of fieldiness. That's all I should have to say to be done with the argument, isn't it? I mean, 104 magical fields interconnected in some magical way that allows them to communicate and end up looking like the photon went from point A to point B in a dead straight line at a dead constant speed. What do I need all that crap for when it's doing something as simple as, yes, the rock flew across and landed over here? I mean, it's dirt simple, and yet I need 404 different fields to make it happen. Yeah, sure. That's all I should have to say. That should be the end of the argument. But their theory is a God theory. It's silly. It's mush. It's not made out of anything. What are these fields but nothing but Holy Ghosts? They're not even Jesuses and gods. They're just Holy Ghosts. They're completely vacuous mush. And he's telling me I need to argue that. I can't argue a religious theory, a made-up pile of crap that is totally incoherent. We need 104 interconnected fields to make something go from point A to point B at a constant speed. Bullshit.
People talk about quantum electrodynamics and the fundamentals of quantum mechanics being wave-like in nature, in the existence of all these fields. What they're talking about is probability fields.
So again, he's saying one interpretation is the only interpretation, which is just nonsense. We know physicists disagree. There's string theory. There's lots of different theories they have about mechanism. And again, they wouldn't have come up with this word interpretation if they didn't have different interpretations. So again, it's just bullshit. You says you. You have your little favorite people and you say they're the kings of quantum mechanics. Well, the videos I'm watching, I don't see any of that shit. I certainly don't see it coming from Susskind, who explains gravity by essentially perfectly analogizing it to water under pressure. So how is he doing field theory when his entire presentation is based on something so conventional?
Quantum mechanics has it that all matter of all sizes has an associated wave. This was thanks to de Broglie.
Right, and this is not all physicists, number one. Not all physicists buy the argument, and as I've already pointed out, it's a ludicrous proposition right on its face. Okay, momentum, speed, velocity is not a frequency, okay? Because you can equate it in photons with the amount of energy that can be put into a distance. Clearly, momentum has the same idea that a certain distance is a certain amount of momentum if you're going a certain speed. So certainly there's a connection in the sense that you can use momentum to define force, and then you could use frequency to define force. In certain circumstances, they can equate. But there's no frequency. The electron doesn't have a frequency. It doesn't have a wavelength. It doesn't have any of that shit. You're just using another term, a silly term, that it doesn't have. You're saying let's put it in a teddy bear suit and pretend it's a teddy bear. Okay, you can do that, but it's not real. It's horse shit. Overt bullshit.
An insight, but became a fundamental part of quantum mechanics, and ultimately the realization that all quantum mechanics offers concretely is probabilities, predictions about probabilities.
It's not predictions, okay? So again, it's not predicting anything. If I watch a roulette wheel and I write down on a piece of paper what numbers come up and I find out, oh, it's all equal for each little slot. It's the same probability. Oh, and then I write a formula for that, that's not predicting anything. So I've already made this argument like 17 times. What, you didn't hear the argument already? This is just bullshit to sit there and say this means anything, okay? We all know that the effects are probabilistic. We know that there's a certain likelihood statistically of even our lives and all kinds of things that are going to happen to us based on statistical charts that you can draw about what the average human being has happened to them. So we know there's probability in the world. They're not inventing the fact that there are circumstances that cause enough variability in outcomes, and the variability is dependent on certain things being right angles to gravity, or whether you're going perpendicular to gravity, you'll have a different outcome. So you can base that on probabilities. So what? That's not that's not quantum mechanics to say it that simply. The point is they're saying the randomness isn't variable controlled. That the randomness comes from God. Okay, God bestows on the universe some sort of photon that does something not for some mechanical reason, but because it knows it's obligated to fulfill a probability equation. So there's not some real wall that the dice hit. The dice know in advance that I have to satisfy my probability obligation, so I'll just magically turn to fit the right probability outcomes. I mean, it's an obvious pile of shit. But to say that most physicists believe that, again, is also shit.
So when we say a proton has a wave-like characteristic, or the Ricardan C60 Buckball, Buckman, Fulminster, whatever, molecule supposedly exhibiting wave-like characteristics through two.
Again, they're just trying to normalize, they're just trying to standardize their mathematics. So they do the mathematics for frequency as being a momentum, a character of momentum. And so because they have a formula that uses frequency as momentum, well, yes, it'll just be easy. We'll just call any other kind of momentum. We'll use a standard K. We'll use a standard constant for each mass element and decide that we'll just associate its momentum with a frequency, because we use frequency to define momentum. But that's all it is, okay? It just really has to do with the bad equation designing, where they started saying frequency was momentum when frequency is not momentum. So they have an equation that requires them to put it in the term frequency, and so they have to instead of putting momentum, they put F. Wavelength, instead of the right term, which was momentum. So just because they use the wrong term in an equation, we're supposed to believe that all these things are doing some sort of wave thing, when of course they're not.
Slits and so on and so forth. And all these massive objects get a different wave characteristic. The smaller and smaller they get, till you get to the ultimate smallness of no mass, and then you only have the wave characteristic.
So more horseshit about some no mass item. So again, we're back to this argument. He thinks they don't have, that's not weakly evidenced. He thinks the invention of some idea of a massless momentum particle makes some kind of sense to somebody on Earth. That somebody rational could sit there and say, oh yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to give something momentum that has absolutely no mass. It can move things. It can bang into them and cause them to transfer momentum, and yet it has no mass to do it with. It's ludicrous on its face, and he won't concede, well, yeah, that does sound like something they can't substantially source. They're not going to find evidence of that somewhere. Where did they prove it didn't have mass? How did they weigh it? On what fucking scale did they weigh the impossibly small? Oh, that's right, there is no fucking scale to measure it on. Except the obvious scale, which is we watch it frickin' have momentum, and we watch it transfer the momentum. So why are we playing a game that, oh yeah, it doesn't weigh anything though? Of course that's horse shit. What the fuck is going on in your goddamn head? This fucking preachy bullshit about concepts that are just plain stupid. Why are you defending it? And that's what this is. Don't pretend you're not defending it.
And no mass, but still a particle. Revealing that mass in itself is not the definition of what it means to be a particle. just another abstract property.
Yeah, and again, there's no particles. So just you keep saying it like they actually believe that. No, they don't believe they're particles. Quite obviously, a particle doesn't need a field. Particle doesn't need a medium. This is just horseshit. There's no point in having the particle if all that matters is the medium transmitting it somewhere. If the medium's doing all the work, then what do you need the particle for? I mean, the two things are fundamentally incompatible. If you believe in particles, you don't need the frickin' medium. And if you believe in mediums, you don't frickin' need the particle floating on top of the wave saying, I'm a particle on top of a big, strong, heavy wave that has all the momentum and all the power. I don't do anything. I just sit on top of it. When they found the Higgs boson, right? I can play you the PBS video. They didn't care about finding the Higgs boson. That didn't matter. They wanted the Higgs boson so they could have the Higgs field. They wanted the field. They don't think the Higgs boson does anything. They just think the field does something. I mean, fuck.
Anyhow, the important thing is light, insofar as it's a wave, in the true, deepest quantum understanding, is a particle, and insofar as it's at all wave-like, it behaves wave-like, and because it has a probability wave.
So it's more just horseshit. Again, who says so? Every physicist I could play has a different way of defining it and stating it. So again, this is just crap. Obviously, Feynman was a probability is the nature of the universe believer. He wasn't a Copenhagen and he wasn't a many-worlder. Okay, but clearly the Copenhagen is a wave theory, and clearly the many-world is a completely insane flat Earth pile of crap.
Attached to it, nothing to do with waving mediums, really. Yeah.
So again, just more horseshit. Oh, nothing to do with it except it's integral to their demonstrating that somehow that's what the phenomenon of interference is. They're claiming it's interference. Now, if you don't turn it into a wave, how could it possibly interfere? There's no interference pattern without the interference waves doing the work. So how can you say they believe the pattern is caused by interference, yet they don't believe it's wave caused? I mean, again, that just doesn't make any fucking sense. Unless you're, like I said, unless you're saying, okay, the Feynman interpretation has won, and the physicists actually believe in random particle manipulation by God, who tells the particle that, well, you're way behind in your probabilities. You've had too many heads, so you need some tails. So you go left, okay? Too many people have gone right before you, so you have to go left this time. Complete nonsense.
As far as we say there's an electromagnetic field out there that is doing the probability waving.
So we say, why are you saying the word we say? Why are you phrasing this way? Obviously this is another contention, this fact that there's any electric or magnetic field or that a photon has any of these fucking functions. All of that is insanely weakly evidenced, and yet you're just talking like somehow they have some reason to believe it besides they've always have, like a religion. Mommy told me so. Okay, Maxwell told me so. Even though Maxwell didn't prove him so, he didn't prove any of this crap, and you're just spouting it like they're spouting it. Like, well, okay, it's based on this non-existent pile of non-existent evidence. Again, photons are not moved by magnetism. Photons are not manipulated by an electrical field. So why are we having this conversation? We know the only thing electrical about photons is the fact that they hit fucking electrons. They're not electrical until they hit an electron. I mean, what's the point? I mean, you've heard me make these arguments. You're pretending they're not good arguments. They're fucking good arguments, idiot. Why don't you make a counter argument somewhere in here? To the point that it's just idiotic to sit there and tell me there's a huge big pile of evidence I have to overcome proving that there's a magnetic and electric field. No, I don't think there's any evidence proving it. And there's not even evidence that, in my opinion, would force somebody who's reasonable, who looks at the evidence without any kind of bias. If you take their theory and my theory and present it to an alien, I don't think there's any chance in hell he's going to say, oh yes, that electric field wavy crap makes sense. No, I don't think so.
It's just to distinguish it from the same point in space also can be doing an electron existing probability thing, or a proton existing probability wave thing. So we call them fields just to distinguish the idea that at a single point in space they're actually residing a number that is attached to.
It doesn't matter. So what? The point is how are they changing the numbers? All right, and they're changing the numbers in this convoluted manner that when all is said and done, you can draw the straight line. You don't need all the convoluted fields interacting, because in the end it's going to be a line between point A and point B, and it's going to be a straight fucking line. So why all the fields? Why all the nonsense? Why all the conversions? They're a complete waste of energy to accomplish nothing. And just as I've pointed out, the universe wouldn't do this the hard way. The universe is dumb. It does things the easy, simple way. It doesn't do this anything the complicated way when it doesn't have to. The universe forces things to become efficient. Where's the efficiency in this nonsense? In the end, you end up with the visual product of something moving straight lines. That's the end product. That's the thing you can reverse the physics, and you get this fucking, the reversal is quite obvious what happens. And yet you're saying we need all this complex crap to do something dirt simple.
Many phenomena, a separate number to each phenomena. So that's...
So and again, it's not a separate number to each phenomena, and the phenomena is they made up. We know that things have speed, mass, momentum. We don't know that they have any fucking thing called a spin or a quantum number. That's all just made up crap. So where's the evidence that any of that shit is necessary? And in my opinion, there is no evidence that it's necessary. The evidence is because of their misinterpretation of experiments. So you brought up this stupid Stern-Gerlach thing, so I did think about it, and I'm saying, what's the point? Okay, so if the atom was going through an evenly balanced field, all right, and let's say it is a silver atom, and it's paramagnetic, and it's going to, Lenz's law is going to affect the atoms just as well. Lenz's law doesn't mean the atoms have to be in a solid form to be Lenz's law. It means that each individual atom is getting affected by the law. So if you made that argument and you said, okay, well, it's in an even field, then, and the atom's fundamental function is going to be is to create an opposite charge. Okay, so essentially, whatever field hits it, it becomes the same as that field. That is, becomes repulsive. So it becomes the same thing. So if it's positive charge, it becomes positive charge, and so it repels. Well, if it's in an even field, then of course it's going to end up going pretty dead straight, because it would get positively charged if it goes up a little. The positive charge would push it back down. Then it would go into the weaker negative field, so it would have to go down a little bit further before it becomes negatively charged and repulsive, and then it goes back up because now it's repelling, but it goes back up slower because that field is weaker. And then when it gets back up towards the pointy thing again, it goes up into it, and that's a very strong field. It's a rapidly increasing field. And so as it hits that, it goes a little too far, and then it gets extra energy, pushes it back down again. So what's it doing? Yeah, it's doing this again. All right, so if I put it in an uneven field, if I put it in an even field, plus and minus, it's just going to do this, bounce along. And if I put it in this uneven field, what's going to happen is it's going to keep reacting, it's going to keep charging to whatever force hits it. So if red force hits it, it turns red. If black force hits it, it turns black. So it's going to become repulsive, and it's going to, because the field's uneven, it's going to end up jostling this way. So what's going to happen when it comes out of the experiment? What motion? It's doing this motion forward, and it's doing this. So what do you think is going to happen when it comes out of the experiment? That's right, it's either going to be on the way up or it's going to be on the way down. Those are going to be the primary, accelerations because of the uneven field. So there's an explanation. We don't need any spinning bullshit. We just have to follow the physics we already know exists.
That's important to remember in what I've come to today. The purpose of today's video is to suggest perhaps that draft science drops the endless polemic. Yeah.
The endless polemic, which is my obligation, frankly. All right, if I'm going to say the authorities are wrong, Wasteloday, guess what? You can't go file your case and say I'm right and nobody's wrong. That's not what you do, right? You don't just go in and say I'm right. Here's my right evidence, okay, of me being right. You point out where you've been wronged. All right, so there's two sides to this thing. There's not only your obligation to present a solid theory, which I think I've done, but obviously in this atmosphere of their devotion, of this fucking devotion that even you have shown for 7 years, where you're making these irrational arguments in defense of fucking backward lenses. I mean, you still haven't accepted that the evidence for lensing is insanely weak. And that's even before I said word one. An honest person should be able to admit that, well, there are contradictions in this evidence, aren't there? I mean, first, this Eddington experiment is based on just such a weak, probability of getting this, being able to even pull this crap off. It's such a tiny difference in such a blurry, bluriverse. And then these galactic images overtly scream to you, well, how come it only does Einstein rings and it doesn't do any of the other lensing artifacts? The only ones we ever get are partial Einstein rings. Where are all the other 999 artifacts that you should be getting from lenses? And so you should have been able to figure that on your own and say the evidence has a contradiction in it. Why don't we see lensing where we know there's a huge amount of gravity? Why don't we see any? You should have been able to say that much. And you couldn't even do that. You just kept making irrational, nonsensical, stupid defenses for evidence that is garbage. So don't sit there and say you're playing some role here, okay? You're not a devil's advocate. You're a fucking defense lawyer for bullshit. That's all you've been, and that's all you're doing with this stupid fucking idiotic critique that I could totally, I can't tell you how uninterested I am in hearing and getting driving advice from somebody who's fucking on a tricycle. I mean, you've demonstrated no ability to either be persuasive or to win arguments or to do anything. And here you are telling me how I'm doing it wrong. I mean, you can't see how that's just a waste of fucking time. I'm going to take advice from a guy who's 6 feet down inside the quicksand. And I'm supposed to take his advice on how not to sink in quicksand. Shit.
Because his channel really could be more described as an endless polemic rather than the development of
yeah, it's just amazing, right? So I sat there and developed the whole theory right here in front of you, making the video. So half the videos, yes, have pretty much been me arguing my theory, defending my theory, and half the videos have been pointing out how their evidence is insanely weak, that it's convoluted, it has grotesque contradictions in it, it's absolute rubbish. I play their fucking videos, I sit there and don't quote mine them, I don't cheat the argument, and I go through the laborious process of explaining how they've made a mistake or they've misinterpreted something. And I've had to go and research the experiments to even be able to do that. And here this fucking cunt says, oh, you're doing it wrong. Fuck you. God damn it. What a fucking piece of shit. I mean, this is just such a pyro video. No content, just a bunch of fucking bullshit commentary and accusations. Fuck that.
His theory, and I think his theory is developed best by addition of phenomena that it can explain. That's how you get people to drop one explanation and have another.
No, it isn't. So where's your evidence of that? Where's your evidence that telling people the honest truth works? The theory of evolution has been around now for, 170 years? It's been articulated, and the evidence, more and more and more evidence with every passing year, more evidence has been compiled. And is it winning? What's happening on planet Earth, retard? Has the winning argument that evolution is a fucking fact winning? No, it isn't, jackass. So it's not just about making that argument. You have to make the argument that you're fucking being a lying weasel scumbag to sit there and trash the truth like this, to sit there and waste your neurological existence on this planet by enforcing and imposing and propagandizing a bunch of fucking lies. That's what religion does. And that's what fucking physics is doing. They're addicted to it. It has nothing to do with what the fucking truth is. They're addicted to their fables and their heroes of physics, and that's all this is about, is a silly fucking soap opera addiction. It's not about the truth or a fair fight or a rational argument. Dumbass.
When it's both more plausible, but it has power and applicability to all phenomena. So,
Yes, well, eventually, look, the standard for the contest is going to be somebody has to say it's more consistent with the evidence and more complete. So it's more consistent and more complete. Those are the two words that have to come out of his mouth, all right, before we'll say he's bought in. But I mean, what's the point of that little fucking statement? Oh, yes, well, you have made apparently a pretty good argument, because I just sit there and basically said, yes, it has power as a theory, and it's yet somehow you're doing it wrong. No, I think that's evidence that I'm doing it right. And again, your arguments from the very beginning have been nothing but obnoxious denials. They haven't been based on any real interest in understanding. They've just been in the interest of defending. You've been defending the wrong position, and you've been doing it very aggressively.
I know he's introduced a concept of polarity as sort of a kind of staggering of the fundamental elements, but I don't know how he's treating the phenomena of circular polarization. And
so he just throws in little crap here and there, right? You want to have a conversation about polarization. Again, they have no theory of what it is. They have nothing. So I've given you at least some hope of understanding, and I've made the point that circular polarization would really be about eliminating something's polarization. So you put the stuff through enough filters, and you start refining and narrowing and narrowing and narrowing the amount of deviation that exists until you have a piece of light that can get through any filter. Something like that.
Similarly, he admits there's still work to be done to thrash out and make sure about the feature of drag, get that bottomed exactly.
So again, another paraphrase. Instead of saying that he has a pretty substantial foundation of the argument, pointing out how momentum is something that has to happen to you. So you don't just get it for free. You just don't have instant velocity. You have to go through this acceleration process, and the acceleration process is essentially a transfer of force. There's force coming out the one end going this way, and the other rest of in a big giant flame, and the rest of the force is going inside you. That's just a fact. And the process of when that force is going in you can make you all kind of weird and fucked up, because your body's getting really manipulated, because there's a bunch of force being rearranged in every one of your fucking atoms. There's a whole bunch of new shit happening going on, and I've explained how that can explain time dilation. So there's no, oh yeah, it's just he has a vague notion. No, I've provided a pretty elaborate, pretty extensive, pretty broad explanation of inertia and velocity that makes it quite clear that it's not as simple as, oh, I just throw something and it has forever motion. It's not that simple.
The feature that results of predictions of spin phenomena, but there's actually so many phenomena that
and so many of them are obscure and just made up. Okay, they made up the word spin, they made up the concept. It's totally unquantum mechanical. You can't possibly turn spin into it has half spin, it has 3/4 spin. It's a bullshit idea. Doesn't make any sense. It's like saying, okay, it can only go so we have all these rules for how the fucking atoms work, about energy levels and all this other horseshit. Now we have some new rule where it can only spin 25 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour or 75 miles an hour, but it can't do anything less or more. So now we've turned something so obviously linear as spin, and now we're trying to turn it into something binary. It's just bullshit. It's not going to work. It doesn't make any fucking sense. They won't even admit that they're not, they say, oh, well, we're not talking about real spin. We're just using the word spin to, like, make it sound like it's spin, but it's not spin. I mean, just bullshit. And again, no evidence for any of this crap. They just made it up as an explanation. They see a phenomenon and they say, well, what could possibly be responsible? Well, what if we made everything spinning? Maybe the spin is throwing it down and the spin is throwing it up. I mean, that's an obvious thing you could sit there and suggest. And because nobody was in the room who said, well, wait a minute, doesn't that just mess up the whole thing? Because now you're creating a whole bunch of extra momentums. Now things have their forward momentum plus their angular momentum, and what are they spinning in, and why would spin make them move in a direction unless they're in a medium? So all that crap doesn't make any sense. They have to hit something. The two spinning things have to hit each other. The spinning tops going the opposite directions have to hit each other before they can bounce off of each other's spin. I mean, it's completely, it's so weak. It's completely there's no texture, there's no detail. No detail of this concept at all. It's just another vague notion like the virtual photon or the dark matter. Just another vague, undefined, ooh, yeah, boo, 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 boo. Because they made a bad guess. And that's all they did. They were guessing. Well, why does one go down and the other one go up? And they guessed. And they guessed at a mechanism that, yeah, okay, if nobody's going to be critical of it, you can get away with it. But if somebody starts scrutinizing it or scratching at it a little bit, then all of a sudden it doesn't make any sense. It's a stupid reason.
Probably ignorant of. When they say these things have been tested more than quantum mechanics, more than any, it means there's all kinds of phenomena out there. One passed my doorstep just the other day, and I'd forgotten it. But there's the superfluidity flowing without resistance.
Yeah, all of these things can be explained without any quantum mechanical bullshit. I mean, obviously, the whole idea that you take heat out of a system, we already know that was essential to how magnets work, that heat is very destructive to the lining of the domains. And we know that electrical conductors, it's the same kind of deal, that the more agitation the atoms have, the more jiggling they're doing, the harder and harder it is for the electrons to move pressure. So how is this at all miraculous? Oh, it's miraculous. We have to come up with some bizarre explanation for why it works. No, the explanation for why it works is, oh yeah, if you have really hard pavement, cars can go really fast on it. But if I make the pavement out of sand, then cars can't go as fast. Duh! I mean, this stuff isn't even hard to explain. It's so simple and obvious almost.
Superconductivity, conducting without resistance.
Let's understand, it's not without resistance. Okay, the Hadron Collider, there's a certain amount. They can get like 6 Tesla, and that's as high as they can go. They can't shove infinite amount of electricity into the wire, so it's just a horseshit to say there's no resistance. No, well, there is a limitation to capacity. There's only so many atoms in the conductor, and you can only shove so much crap through the conductor, and then you're done. All the atoms are involved, the voltage is as high as it can be, and you're getting as much wattage as you can pump through the fucking wires, and that's it. Once you've got all the atoms involved, you can't involve any more atoms, you're done. That's your limitation. So this idea that somehow you can just pump an infinite amount of electricity through an infinitely small wire, that's not the truth.
Casimir effect, where two plates exert a force because of the supposed
So your interpretation, right? As I understand the Casimir effect, okay, what the real argument is why does one plate go positive and one plate go negative? And it doesn't require you to use any vacuum knowledge or any other crap. You're just asking the question. It has a 50-50 chance. Why does it go one way or why does it go the other way? I mean, that's one of those questions where you say, well, it's just kind of obvious that the two plates could never be perfectly identical. And so one is going to have a tiny, tiny, tiny bit more influence. And that little tiny difference, that one little piece of dust, that one little difference will be exaggerated through the interaction of the two plates, and eventually the one plate's going to win. Just like in a gravity argument. Okay, I could throw marbles going this way around the Earth, and I could throw another set of marbles in the same orbit going the opposite direction, and the same number of marbles, the same velocity, and the truth is, eventually the marbles are going to be going one way. The ones that are left will be going one way. How does it choose? Well, the choice is made because I can't throw them identically. The marbles can't be identical. One of them will be a little bit more something, and that's all it required. Not hard to explain at all. Fuck you again.
Quantum vacuum and such. But there's so many experiments where they claim something, and
yeah, and they claim it based on weak evidence. They extrapolate. They tell big grandiose stories. They pile it all on this little tiny pinhead of evidence. They have a little pinhead of evidence, and they build this entire frickin' grandiose theory out of what's happening on top of that pinhole, that pinhead evidence. This is just such bullshit. And I've documented them doing it. I've documented their exaggerations. I've documented the fact that they're quote mining the evidence. The single slit experiment as the perfect example. I've documented where they say the interferometer is this, this, and this, and I've pointed out how they haven't even explained how the half-silvered mirror doesn't diffract the light. How can you have two equal beams? Will you answer the fucking question, shit for brain? You're defending their crap. Why don't you? Why you know they've never had to answer any questions. Their evidence is above scrutiny. I don't ever get to make any claims against their evidence, and here you are just basically giving them a oh yeah, well they have lots of stuff going on and they have lots of experiments and they have lots of details. No, they don't. And I've pointed out how they can't get the simplest thing right. They can't tell the history accurately. They can't describe the facts accurately. They come up with all kinds of bizarre experiments that never even happened. All kinds of proof. Well, we've proven it. And you go look at their proof and it's crap.
many of them have been verified. And unfortunately,
so there he goes.
Watching the video,
many of them have been verified. No. Many of them more have been not verified than verified. How many verified experiments have there really been done for any of the stuff they claim? How many? For all of this exchanged bullshit. How many verified, really hard evidence proof experiments do really exist? I mean, that is part of the whole horse shit, is the fact that they get away with it. And here you are reciting the fucking Bible. The Bible of bullshit. Did I ever start this video? Yeah, it says it's recorded. The computer hasn't frozen yet. It's been going for like, 15 hours. So this video might be in trouble. This is going to take a while, so maybe I should just cut it in halves. I mean, I'm just so sick of this. I shouldn't waste my time with this asshole. He's either nitpicking about insane granularity of detail that they don't have to provide, but I have to. Or he's sitting there giving me some sermon on how I'm doing logic wrong. I'm not doing my trial properly because I'm pointing how their evidence is weak and how my evidence is strong. That I have consistent answers and answers that unify, and they have answers that create paradoxes and contradictions, and they're obviously just made up stories.
Saying, oh, he's not done this, he's not done that. That's it's useful to an extent, but you have to get the technical paper and see what their assumptions were and how they argue that the criticism you might point out might be factored in the paper. Yeah.
Well, the paper's full of, well, as we know, photons are waves. Therefore, our black box is obviously a a waverizer, because photons are obviously waves, and so they're waverizing whatever we put in through the box. So they're obviously getting waverized. That's all it is. It's just based on their own assumptions going in. So how can you argue their assumptions? Let's look at the experiment. And again, when you look at the experiment, you can't get past the first stage. I can't get through the beam splitter to even understand their theory of an interferometer. It already fails at the first interaction. It's already in trouble. And yet that's fine with you. I'm doing it wrong, they're doing it right. I'm doing dissidence wrong, they're doing authority right. When clearly you have your argument backwards. As authorities, they're preposterous failures. They're evil, stupid, moronic failures. They're not doing what scientists should be doing at all. They're not dotting all their I's. They're not taking care to make sure they have hard evidence before they draw hard conclusions. They are just saying, we know light's a wave. Do we really know that? Is there really convincing preponderance of the evidence pointing to that being a fucking fact? No, there isn't. And you let them get away with it. Why don't you just make your naggy videos to physicists instead of making them to me, you shithead? Again, I'm doing it all wrong. They're somehow doing it all right. Fuck you. Maybe I'll come back to this, but man, I should just stop watching his fucking videos. He's just such a waste of my goddamn time. And nitpicking or backseat driving. Fuck that shit. Ugh.